Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome on behalf of Dhaka Doc Lab, the third edition. We have a very special honorable delegate here, Mr. Hans Robert Eisenhaue from Germany. Please a warm welcome, Mr. Hans. Mr. Hans, as you all know, he attended our earlier edition, the second Dhaka Doc Lab, for the first time. And as you all remember, Mr. Nilotpal Majumdar reminded us that he had been his, producing gurus, one of the producing gurus that he admires really. And Mr. Hans, as you have already, many of you have seen from the printed brochure, that Mr. Hans has been engaged in production, film producing since long. It's the 1991 since he joined the RTA, the famous film production company, and had a long career over there till 2011. And he joined later on in Fontana, I think, right? Fontana Films, Germany. He moved to Berlin and he started working with Fontana Films. And he had been actually very much engaged with co-productions, film productions for the production companies globally, and has a very unique experience of co-production film market. Actually, he has initiated one of the Syrian filmmakers' film jointly with German Syrian co-production, that is Mr. Talal's films, that had won a lot of awards from different international film festivals like the Cannes, the Sundance, and many others, and ITFA, of course, yeah. So we are very lucky to have him here among us. And Mr. Hans would be, basically, we were requesting him to put a little more light on film producing, which has been a kind of a new activity in our region, comparatively than the European or other Western communities. We have very less experience regarding international film productions, as well as the filmmakers that you all know or you are here, that we are also a little interacted with the global film market, where we are supposed to pitch our projects or apply for co-productions and so on. So I'd request Mr. Hans to put some light on what film producing is basically, and we can start with actually what is a good documentary film basically that you consider.
Okay, thank you very much. What you read here is not the first question. Some filmmakers are already, after beginning developing a story, talking about money, and this is wrong. This is the last question, because filmmaking starts much earlier, and I think, just a second, I have to take that out. No, it's, the documentary filmmaking in this world is more and more complicated because there are very, very many different stories around. There are many different commissioning editors, TV stations, funding stations, but it is always needed for producers and for filmmakers to find this funding for their story. But what is the first thing what one should do to become a very good film? For me, a documentary film is a story at first. The development of a story, this is a very first thing. I know some people who think that they just Google and they go to the internet, they find something interesting, a subject, and then they think this is already the basic thing for a film. I don't agree. I think a film needs to be developed, a film needs to be researched, a profound research on the ground with the people, with the characters in the film. And documentary filmmaking is all about storytelling. Storytelling, a narrative which goes from the beginning until the end, which has, let's say, a conflict in between, and which could be interesting for a larger audience, sometimes only regional or national, but also international and worldwide. And I think documentaries are nowadays more important than ever. Maybe this is exaggerate, but if you have a look on the world like it is, and if you have a look on what's going on in the so-called social media, on YouTube, if you have a look what's going on in television everywhere, documentary filmmaking is something different. Documentary filmmaking means telling stories. And it goes much deeper than for example, a news program, a reportage or something like that. Take an example, we are in Bangladesh, and every year there is a huge flood going on, and we see it in Europe, in the television, we see the people suffering, but we see it from outside. We have no idea what is going on in these communities, with these people, how they survive this sometimes horrible situation. This is something which documentary filmmaking can tell us. It can tell us the background, it can give us more deep knowledge about what's going on in the world. Or take another example, if you have, and this is one of the projects here, this story about a factory which burned down, and the victims died, and mother tries to find justice and accuses the owners and so on. So what we wear, we don't know where it comes from, under which condition it has been made. We see short reportage somewhere, we read an article, but we don't know exactly how these people who are working in these factories live, how they can survive. And this is necessary to know before we buy something, for example. And I'm very sure that documentary filmmaking plays a major role in the struggle for human rights. And if you take also the subject climate change, everybody is discussing it, and everywhere you find something in the news. But what are the stories of those people who are going to lose their island in the Pacific Ocean or something? What is directly happening with people in Italy or somewhere else where huge floods and thunderstorms destroy their villages and things like that? So I think this is something which documentary filmmaking can deliver. It can open the eyes, it can make you thinking, it can initiate a debate about what's going on in the world, and it is the best weapon against so-called fake news, the lies in politics or society or economy, to find out what is really behind, what is behind the curtain, where is the corruption in a society, who are the criminal guys who have the profit on this. And really brave documentary filmmakers, they show this. They give us the opportunity, and you too give us the opportunity to have a look behind the curtain. And this is for me the basic thing of documentary filmmaking, to have an idea, then to develop this idea, to research this idea, and then to create a story, to find characters, to find a conflict, and then you can tell a story. And it doesn't matter in which genre it is history, it is contemporary, is it current affairs, or is it arts, for example? Same thing, always the same thing. You need a fascinating story to tell, to be told, to get your audience and to have a communication with the audience at the end.
Well, in this point, I would just like to ask you one more, relative questions. That is, sometimes our regional filmmakers, I'm considering this maybe the Southeast Asian region and so on, including Bangladesh. Like we are newer, kind of comparatively newer toward, approaching for funding to different international platforms and filmmaking producing companies. So in applying in these conditions, we have found like if these organizations, as you have mentioned, that they are behind important events or conditions that are taking place in that particular region, maybe the flood or turmoil in people's life, or whatever some difficulties people are being through, like the recent cases of the Rohingya, intervention in the region, like they have to flee here to save their life. But at the same time, we find like applying with these subjects or something, a more deeper introspection toward human suffering or human condition. While dealing in these subjects, we have found like the international funding organizations are more interested toward very focused issues, like very discussed and like very highly spoken issues. So apparently from that situation, how do you consider like a filmmaker with its all artistic and personal approach towards cinema could also apply toward this, meeting toward this, funding situations, producing?
I mean, we should later talk about co-productions and what means co-production and what are the advantages and the disadvantages. But it is true that a lot of commissioning editors and also the platform owners and so, they are sometimes not very keen to have typical regional or local stories. I heard it very often that the commissioning editor said, oh, okay, this story is very local, it should be shown in the television of the region or everywhere, but it's not for an international audience. I think in many cases I personally disagree, because I'm convinced that also a story is based in a region or even local. It can be so fascinating that it could be interesting for a worldwide audience. It can be universal. If it tells a human story, if it tells a story, a drama of human beings, of people who are in a relationship, and if it's told in a way that people of another culture are able to understand what is going on there. Take this, sorry that I just take some also already from the catalog. I've read about this school teacher of a madrasa yes, and she educates girls who should avoid being married too early. This is a huge issue. This is a huge human rights issue. and the conflict with the traditional and fundamentalist Islamists in this case, because the girls are able to dance, to sing, and so on. This is something which is interesting for the rest of the world. So also it is based in one school in a remote area and so on. So I could mention a lot of examples that could be interesting for a larger audience. What I would like to show you now, maybe I should start with showing something. With my company, I'm doing for the time being a co-production with two Georgian filmmakers. Georgia is traditionally a country with a huge cinema tradition, and these two filmmakers, they filmed during the last 7 or 8 years in a little village in the Caucasus Mountains, where this so-called new what is it? Seidenstraße. How do you call that in English? The Chinese are creating this railroad from China to Europe. How is it called in English? Silk Road. Sorry, yeah, the new so-called new Silk Road, and this railway is going through their village or through their valley. And the film is focused on their life there. What is changing with that? What are changing for themselves, for the house owners, for the people, and what is changing for example, for the nature? And I should show you. It's just a rough cut. It's not really finished yet. We hope that we can present it at ITFA in November. And it's a co-production between Georgia and Germany, my company, and we are doing it for the European Cultural Channel Arte and for a couple of others. Maybe you are interested that you watch a couple of minutes. It begins very dark, but then it... And the people haven't been informed what's going on there. They have been very surprised that suddenly everything is changing, and this film starts very, very slowly, and then it becomes quite dramatic because of the conflict between the locals and the Chinese workers, but also with officials from the government. And the nature changes because there are some changes in the nature, and some rockets are going down into the village, houses are destroyed and everything. What I want to say is, this is an example from my point of view that a story is a very, in the beginning, local or regional story with a few of people. One of the characters is this guy in the beginning, the station manager of the station, and then suddenly it becomes relevance, because it's an example which you could tell all along the way of the Silk Road, the new Silk Road, where states are collaborating, working with China, and they get money from China, and they get more and more economically depending from this. And and the people and the governments are saying, we have, you have a lot of profit, jobs and everything, but finally the people pay for that at the end of the day. So this is one example I would like to...
And I would also like to add in a flick that the aesthetic quality of the tradition of cinema is absolutely there, like the subtlety and the the mundanity of life and like the lensing and other things that has been very interestingly been taken care of. So
it is not a film which is actually made for television. It's a film which is made for cinema and for festivals. On the other hand, I always, in my whole professional life, I try to take films to the screen which have exactly this cinematic qualities, because I don't like this kind of contradiction between television and cinema. Unfortunately, a lot of commissioning editors and TV responsibles, they are very fast in their judgment, saying, okay, this is too slow, this is not for cinema. If the second scene is coming, the audience has been already vanished. But on the other hand, I trust that more and more people want to see also this kind of films, not only in cinema. And the streaming platforms, they are showing this kind of films, and the people are buying the abonnements, and they watch this kind of films on the streaming platforms, because television less and less is going to show them.
And also, so by that way, we can also understand that what would be the prerequisite for a filmmaker to apply toward this fundings and all, because he must be possessing and considering his story about communicating it to the other part of the condition. So how do you just figure out a few points maybe that what are the prerequisites that a filmmaker must possess?
Yeah, I think it is very important that you find partners. There are only a few examples that films coming from Latin America, Asia, Africa, and so on, which go immediately to European television without being a co-production. Because the television responsibles, the controllers, and all these people, they want to have, so to say, somebody in between who represents, in a way, their culture. One can find that, okay, I find it in a way critical, but on the other hand, it is good because of the financing at the end of the day. Because if you want to finance a film which like this, we have already seen, it was funded partly by the Georgian cultural minister, then a small Georgian other fund, and so. And that was not enough to do it. So the filmmakers, they spent a lot of money from their own money, and to do this filming over a period of time of 7 years or even 8. And then we came together, and I could raise in Germany and in Arte quite a lot of money, and they agreed to do it, which is not normal. I mean, it is really it's an exceptional thing, and we could finance finally the film, and we can finish it now. Otherwise, it would have taken another year or more to go to other fundings, to Sundance, to ITFA. It was also ITFA Bertha Fund, by the way. I mean, most of you, they know ITFA Bertha Fund, which is a very, very important fund for this kind of films at the end of the day. I personally think that co-productions, if you can avoid to do co-productions, then you should do it. But mostly you cannot avoid it because otherwise you cannot finance your film. It has advantages, it has also disadvantages. A disadvantage is that in some cases, if a co-producer comes in with a lot of funding, then he tries to change the story, or he tries to take over the majority of the film and so on, and then you are in a situation that you are going to lose your total copyright and the total control of your film. This is sometimes not good. One of the examples, one of the most prominent examples was the film Sugar Man. I don't know if you know it. Sugar Man was a film about a musician. It was originally the idea of a Swedish filmmaker, and it was a film about 600,000–700,000 euros or something. And suddenly, because of the music, because of the interesting story, a British-American producer took over, raised a lot of money in America, and finally it was an American film, and a British-American film, and it won the Oscar. So that is sometimes difficult, and the director more or less lost the control of this.
So parallelly, I would like to ask you that whether these are kind of films that you have mentioned, these are a little bit bigger co-production films by budget size and all. But what did you think about, like, for smaller, comparatively smaller independent film projects? They have also some scopes for applying to medium range of funds and all this also. And in those cases, the design of the proposal, whether they would also matter, like in consideration for funding or so.
I mean, now we are starting. We are talking again, talking directly about money. I try to avoid that in a way.
Money,
no, I know. Funding is a very important thing, but content, story, and these things, they are much more important in the beginning, and therefore this kind of workshop is so necessary to be done, and we need this kind of meeting points to network, to meet people, and to find the money somewhere else. And I can give you another example of a film which has been in the beginning a very little tiny story, and it became finally a film which has been nominated for an Oscar. It started all in the Palestinian West Bank, and a young family father, he was frustrated about the occupation by the Israelis, and he started filming how they behaved and how they treated the people. And over a period of time of about 6–7 years, he filmed every day or every second day what was happening. He had at the end a huge amount of material, and he had 5 broken cameras because each camera has been destroyed during his filming by the Israeli army. And so he came with this huge amount of material to a workshop like this, and we discussed with him the story and tried to find a way through all this material to have at the end a fascinating story. Then it happened that at the pitching, which takes place tomorrow, one of the guests from France, he articulated interest, and he took over with the Palestinian guy, and they found a director. And that's interesting, they found a director because the filmmaker was not a director, he was just a cameraman, and they needed somebody who had the skills to make a film. Was an Israeli, and it was suddenly a fantastic Palestinian-Israeli French international co-production, starting in a tiny little village in a let's say a lemon tree yard or something. I just show you 2 minutes the trailer.
أنا انولدت وعشت كل حياتي في بلعين، قرية اللي واقعة بين التلال. القرية واقعة داخل الأراضي المحتلة من الضفة الغربية. هذول هم ال5 كاميرات تاعتي، كل كاميرا مرحلة في الحياة. في مرة يجي مهندس إسرائيلي يعمل كيسات عشان يبنوا جدار فاصل في وسط أرض. وهذا اليوم انكسرت كاميرتي الأولى بقنبلة غاز. لما بصير إشي في القرية على طول بحس إني لازم أصور.
شوفي يصير فينا نروح على التصوير ونروح شغل الشغلات شوفي.
حكيت على يا ابو محمد ما فيش هيك مرض هذا جوا الجدران
لا ولا شيء.
ليش هيك تقدر تسوي زي
هذا ما يمكن في بنى. أنا بعرف إنهم بجوز يدقوا على بابي في أي دقيقة، بس راح أضل أصور. هذا بيساعدني إني أواجه الحياة وأضل عايش.
So this was at and then it got an Oscar. This was at IDFA and premiered at IDFA, and then it was in Los Angeles and worldwide acknowledged in a lot of festivals. So I think this is another example when a story started in a very local area, and this is the same for you. If you have a strong story, the most important thing is a strong story and very good characters and compelling conflict and things. For me, the 3 keys of a film, of a good story, that is first access, second research, and the third is a good camera, good images, because this is always also something which is necessary. And then if you have a strong story and if you have characters who can carry out the conflict and who stand for something, then it is possible to go international. Also, if your story is a small one. On the other hand, if there is a link, for example, like in many films, they have a link to Europe, that the filmmaker has filmed not only here but also in Europe. So there are possibilities to find interest. On the other hand, I have to say, unfortunately, nowadays our television stations in Europe, and not only in Europe, I think worldwide, they focus more and more on local stories, ignoring their potential, but local stories as their own stories. I give you another example. Maybe how much time we have? We have time? Okay, I give you another example. When let's take a film about somebody who has a subject like cancer, or a subject like robbery or whatever. People, commissioning areas would say, okay, we have that in our region also, and we already showed something about it, so we don't need your film anymore. Also, it's much better maybe, and much more fascinating, and so on. So I would like to show you something which has been a film, a story and a film which has been pitched 2 years ago in Kolkata, and it is a film about a team of palliative care people in Delhi who are going around and helping sick people, cancer people with a cancer to not to survive, but to take what happened to them, and to give them a way to be calm and not to suffer too much. This is a very, very strong subject, and immediately everyone says, oh no, that's too dark, that something has to do with death, or that's not for me. When it was pitched, the reaction was quite divided. Some liked it because of the cinematography, and others said, no, it is black and white, and that doesn't work for our audiences in television. And others said, you know, we have this palliative care teams also in our country, and we don't need something coming from India. Anyway, the film became a co-production, and it could be financed by international money, but also partly, a little part from India. And now it's close to be ready, and it will hopefully also have its premiere in Amsterdam. I would like to show you a couple of minutes of this film, and when I saw it the first time, I saw a lot of material, and I saw the first rough cut, the second rough cut, and I realized that this will become a masterpiece, and a very, very good example of a cooperation between an Indian filmmaker and European cooperation, so to say. So all in all, there are three cases. They go throughout the film, and the patients at the end, they die. Only one has maybe a chance at the end. But I always said it's not a film about death, it's a film about life. It's it's a film about the end of the life, and it's more a film about also the people around, the relatives, and the palliative care team, which is fascinating how close they are going to this patient. So this film is universal. This is something which happens everywhere, and it's additionally a film which shows how necessary it would be, and it is, in countries like India or Bangladesh to improve the situation of palliative care. In Europe or in America, everything is in a way fine, you know. But here it's relative rare that people care like these people we have just seen. This is something which creates a discussion, which creates really thinking. People think about their own situation, their own life, and this is the power of documentary filmmaking, from my point of view. 2 days ago, I was in Berlin in a screening. Was a huge presentation of a Canadian-European co-production about propaganda and fake news and so on. It was a collection of all these things which happened within the last couple of years. There was no emotion, there was no fascination. After the film, I forgot 2/3 of what I have seen. And if you watch a film like this, or also the other one, then you remember the images, you remember what you have seen, and this is in your mind and in your head. And this is something you have to create as filmmakers. You have to create in people's minds memory. And I used to say, films and documentary films, they are a very, very important part of our audiovisual heritage in this world. And that's all about documentary filmmaking. Let's talk about money, no? No, I would like to say it doesn't make sense that I now tell you different ways of financing your films. I mean, it's so diverse. On one hand, you have public funding from different countries, from cultural institutions, cultural ministers in a lot of countries. For example, this film, Watch Over Me, was partly financed by public money coming from Switzerland, and another money came from Eisenhaue fund in Holland. This is for you one of the most important funding institutions, I would say. And for European co-productions, for co-productions with Europe, there is a special fund which is called Eisenhaue Europe. In this case, you need a European co-producer, and he can apply and he can get maximum 40,000 euros. This was the case in this Watch Over Me film. And then another money came from, will come hopefully, from BBC and a couple of others. Then you have Sundance, the Sundance Institute, you have Tribeca, you have funds like Chicken and Egg, and a lot of different funding institutions worldwide. And then you have also the possibility to bring your film on streaming platforms, and everybody is talking for the time being about Netflix, but Netflix is only one, and Netflix take only the blockbusters, the big things, but there are smaller platforms where you can publish your film, or at the end on YouTube, and it is a large possibility to present your films. The problem is always the funding and the finding the money, and this depends from, I can only repeat it, from how strong your story is, how relevant the subject is, and what can it tell to the rest of the world. That is the only secret of all of that, I would say. Maybe what else shall we, I can show you other things, if you don't mind. Yes?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, good. So I could show you a film which has been done a couple of years ago, 2013. 2013 it was in ITFA, 2014 it was in Sundance. It is a film which has been done by many people who had tiny cameras and filmed the beginning of the Syrian war in Homs. I don't know if you have watched this film, Return to Homs, which is a co-production between Germany, other countries in Europe, Canada, Japan, and different Arab funds. And it has been done by a young Syrian filmmaker. Meanwhile, he is not anymore so young, but he is meanwhile living in Berlin. And we became friends. We worked on this over 2 years on this film, over 3 years on this film. It started with just an interview. That was the first thing, one scene of interview I have watched at ITFA in 2011, and I was fascinated by the character. And it shows it's an example how important the characters are. It's in a way, one can say it's a character-driven film at the end. A young 19-year-old boy, sportsman. He was a goalkeeper of the young young Syrian football team, and he was one of the best players. And he was at the same time an activist and a singer, and he was one of in a way, the soul and the heart of the beginning of the resistance and the demonstrations in Homs. In 2011. And this was the very first trailer which we had to pitch it for the finance. And because of this guy and his certain charisma and the subject of the ongoing Syrian civil war, in the beginning it was a civil war, meanwhile it's a real international war, one can say. And nobody knew in the beginning what will happen. And this, I said, was the end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And the filmmaker Talal Derki, he filmed until 2013, beginning of 2013. And in the film you see how this in the beginning conflict, riots, demonstrations become incredibly brutal and bloody war at the end. And everything focused on this guy. One of the other guys, he was arrested and killed by the Syrian army. And it's an example of a film which starts with a quite local situation in a city, and then it becomes not a metaphor, but it becomes a film about the whole Syrian war, focused on this city. And the camera work has been done by activists themselves, partly by the filmmaker also. He has been there 2, 3, 4 times. And the material was smuggled out. My co-producer was arrested on the border when he wanted to go to Jordan and then to Egypt. And he was in one of these army prisons. Fortunately, after a couple of weeks, he came out. And it's Orban Mirabia, who is meanwhile the creative head of ITFA in Amsterdam. And so this is a film which, for me, has also a certain sustainability, because it's a film about war, and it shows how war is at the end, and how it affects people, and what does it make with people. Because in the beginning this guy was just a sportsman, and he was liked the life and singing and dancing and so on. And in the end he was a very strong, also quite close to fundamentalism soldier. And yeah, and he made a career after that film. He came out of Homs then, and when Homs was occupied by the Assad regime, for a short time he joined another group of rebels, and 2 or 3 months ago he was killed close to Idlib, because he was in Turkey in exile, he even married, and then he couldn't he couldn't accept not anymore fighting against this regime. He was completely traumatized, and in the end he was a couple of months ago killed. So
yeah, that was
maybe one final example.
Yeah, sure.
One final example. It's a story which is based in Saudi Arabia, and it's a film about women's rights in a way. You know that there have been some changes in Saudi Arabia, and it's a very young filmmaker, and she wants to do this film, and she has made quite good research in Saudi Arabia, and has found some characters who are really able to carry the story, and it's in the beginning of finance, with partly public money and partly television money.
So we're almost at the end of the session, and thanks to you, of course, like for giving us a vivid introspection about the, the producing job. And if anyone likes to add something, and if not, we would like to end up the. So I think everyone has a clear understanding from now onward about what's happening in the producing condition, and like how the producers deal about subjects, and as we have learned out through the discussions. And I'd like to thank, of course, Mr. Hans for your effort behind this presentation, and like that you have taken all the way for arriving here and like for being a decision maker of the event also. And thank you very much everyone for your attention and attending this session. So if there is anything from your end to end of the discussion.
So thank you very much. I would say if you have concrete questions, we will have one-on-one meetings, I guess, after the pitching, and then we can talk more concrete and more detailed on what I can answer your question as far as I can, and I can try to give you an advice finally where to find the money at the end of the day. I would say one thing is very important for you as filmmakers. Let me just here. So when you have everything, when you have finished your workshop here and you had a successful pitching, then it's not the ending. It's the beginning of a journey which can take long. Sometimes filmmakers need 4 or 5 years until they have financed their film. The filmmakers from Georgia, from the platform, they needed 7 years to finance their film, and finally, and they didn't lose anything of their patience and their power and their passion. And therefore, for me, the 3 P's of good, strong producing is power, passion, and patience. Because all of these 3 things you need to make finally a successful film. Well, thank you very much.